Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room hummed with low voices, coffee cups clinking, papers sliding. The maps sprawled across the metal table were marked with red and black lines, circles and arrows that all pointed toward one small valley in the mountains. Men leaned in, shoulders squared, their shadows stretching across the fluorescent-lit walls. But when she shifted her chair forward, ready to speak, the commander's gaze slid past her. She stayed silent, her jaw locked. Because this was not new, she learned long ago how silence could sting more than words. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Her name was Captain Elena Ramirez, 32 years old, special operations, 10 years in uniform. And though her rank was on par with most of the men in that room, her presence still felt tolerated, like she'd slipped into the conversation by accident. The commander tapped the map with a thick finger. Convoy will cut through this pass at 400. We intercept here, neutralize leadership, secure the intel. Extraction within 90 minutes. Clean. Silent. A soldier near Alina leaned back, muttering, "Clean, sure, unless someone drags us down." His eyes didn't meet hers, but they didn't have to. The barb was aimed. Alina kept her eyes fixed on the map, but her stomach burned. She wanted to answer, wanted to push back, but instead she breathed once, deep, steady. Not yet, not here. Because silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The mission was simple on paper, too simple. That was the problem. Intelligence had holes, no clarity on numbers, no confirmation on terrain traps. Alina noticed the blind spots. She always did. And while the others spoke of timings and formations, her mind traced the empty spaces between lines, places where men could vanish, places where death could wait. She reached for the map, finally breaking her stillness. "Sir, there's no satellite coverage on this sector. If they're moving through here, we're blind." For a moment the table hushed. The commander's eyes flicked to hers. Then another officer coughed, dismissive. "We'll adapt. We always do." And just like that, the tide of voices rolled on without her. Alina sat back. Heat prickled beneath her uniform collar. This was how it always began, being underestimated, edged aside. But she'd stopped craving their approval long ago. Respect wouldn't come from words spoken in a room. It would come from what she did when steel met silence. The meeting broke. Boots echoed down the hall as men filed out in groups, their laughter low, their talk easy. Alina lingered. She traced the circle on the map with her eyes one last time. Something about it, it gnawed at her. A gap in the plan no one wanted to acknowledge. Her hand closed into a fist. She thought of her brother. The photograph folded in her pocket, edges worn from years of touch. He'd been 20 when he deployed, 19 when he sent her the last letter, 21 when the call came. Ambushed. No survivors. Every mission she accepted now carried his shadow. Every plan ignored was a reminder of his silence. She would not let another convoy vanish into the dirt without someone seeing it coming. Outside, the night was thick with diesel and dust. The hum of generators filled the air. She walked alone toward the hangar where her gear waited, boots crunching gravel. The others were already inside, adjusting rifles, checking straps, joking in bursts of camaraderie she stood outside of. "Captain," a younger sergeant called, glancing her way. His tone was flat, neutral, not hostile, not warm, just observant. His name was Walker. 24, green around the edges but sharper than most gave him credit for. She nodded back, clipped, and kept moving. The ritual began, armor strapped, rifle checked, night vision calibrated. The weight settled across her shoulders like a familiar ache. A comfort, even. The silence of preparation was where she thrived, where the doubts of others faded and her world narrowed to steel, skin, and breath. The helicopter blades cut the night when they lifted off. The thrum beat into her chest, drowning thought. Outside the open bay, the desert stretched endless, the horizon painted with faint stars. Men shouted to be heard, but Alina stayed still, eyes fixed on the dark line of mountains rising ahead. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. For her this was calm. But calm did not mean unshaken. She thought of the commander's dismissive glance, of the murmured doubt, of her brother's last words scribbled in hurried ink. Don't let them tell you where you don't belong. The helicopter dipped, shadows below deepened, the mission had begun. They fast-roped into silence. Boots sank into dust, the air thick with the smell of dry earth and sweat. No voices carried, only hand signals, rifles raised, eyes scanning. The convoy wasn't due for another 40 minutes, but they needed position, cover, patience. Elena crouched behind a ridge, her rifle angled forward, scanning the pass below. The others spread along the rocks, hidden ghosts in the moonlight. The valley yawned open before them, wide, silent, deceptively still. Walker crawled closer, whispering low, "Feels too quiet, ma'am." Elena nodded, eyes narrowing. "That's because it is." Time dragged. Minutes bled into each other. Her heart ticked steady, but unease tightened her throat. She shifted her scope, tracing shadows, searching for the thing her instincts swore was there. Then dust, a faint plume rising on the far horizon. Engines, the convoy. Men tensed, rifles lifted. The commander's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Positions. Wait for the lead truck to cross the marker." Elena's finger brushed the trigger guard. Her breathing slowed. In, out, in, out. The first truck rolled into view, then another. Armored headlights dimmed. She counted 6. No, 7. But something was wrong. Too smooth, too orderly, too clean. Convoys rarely moved with such calm precision. And where were the outriders, the scouts? Her stomach clenched. A thought struck like lightning. "Ambush," she whispered. But it was already too late. The ridge to their left exploded with fire. Muzzle flashes split the night, the rattle of machine guns tearing the silence apart. Shouts erupted, men scrambling for cover, bullets pinging off rock. The convoy below swerved, but not in panic. No, this was orchestrated. They'd known. They'd baited. Elena dropped flat, dirt biting her cheek as rounds cracked overhead. Her ears rang, the air thick with gunpowder and dust. Walker shouted something, but she couldn't hear. She forced herself up, returning fire, her rifle steady even as chaos erupted. She scanned, looking not just for enemies but for the pattern, the rhythm, the gaps. And then she saw it, figures moving along the high ridge, silhouettes cutting across the stars. Not random, not scattered, coordinated. They were outnumbered, outflanked. She clenched her teeth. This wasn't just a firefight, this was a trap. But what burned most wasn't the gunfire or the chaos. It was the truth dawning sharp and cruel. She had seen it coming, she had warned them. And they had ignored her. The night roared around her, but inside, a cold fire lit in her chest. Doubt had no place here anymore. Because survival would not come from waiting for orders. It would come from her. How many seconds does it take for order to collapse into chaos? Elena counted them, 1, 2, 3. By the fourth, the ridge was alive with gunfire. The valley below churned with dust and headlights. Her team scrambled, shouting over radios that sputtered with interference. Commands overlapped, panicked, tangled in fear. And for one aching moment, it seemed no one was in control. Her cheek pressed into the dirt. The taste of iron filled her mouth. She heard Walker's ragged breathing beside her, felt the sting of gravel slicing her palms as she crawled to better cover. Bullets cracked overhead, whining against stone. The commander's voice came through the earpiece, sharp, urgent. "Hold positions. Hold." His words cut off in static, swallowed by the roar of machine fire. Elena exhaled slowly, steadying her hands. Fear pressed against her ribs, but training carved space through the noise. She lifted her rifle, scope slicing through the smoke. Figures darted along the high ridge, coordinated, disciplined. Not rabble, not chance. They knew exactly where to strike. And that meant someone had given them the script. "Walker," she hissed, "cover left." He hesitated only half a second, but in the chaos, hesitation was eternity. Then he shifted, muzzle sweeping, bursts of fire cutting into the ridge. Elena adjusted right, breathing in rhythm with her shots. 3 rounds. A silhouette dropped. Another ducked. The ridge spat back fire, brighter now, angrier. Men shouted in every direction. She caught fragments. We're pinned. Need medics. Can't see. The voices weren't just noise. They were desperation. She felt it too. That cold pressure in the gut, the knowledge that this wasn't a fight they had chosen. It was one they'd walked into blind. Her brother's voice whispered in memory, "Don't let them tell you where you don't belong." She belonged here, in this fire, in this choice. But survival wasn't enough. If they stayed pinned, they would be overrun. She scanned again, eyes slicing the terrain. There, the sharp incline to the east, jagged but climbable. If someone could flank high ground, they could split the ambushers' line, break their rhythm. Her pulse steadied with decision. She pressed her radio. "Command, we need a push east. They're holding the ridge." Static, no reply. She pressed again, harder. "Command, do you copy?" Nothing. Her stomach sank. Either the commander was down or he was drowning in the same storm. Either way, silence was an answer. The team needed direction, and no one else was giving it. She turned to Walker. His face was pale beneath the streak of dust, his eyes wide but locked on her. Waiting, not questioning, waiting. Elena's chest tightened. Responsibility had a weight all its own, heavier than armor, sharper than bullets. "Walker with me," she ordered. "We're taking the east side." He blinked. "That's, ma'am, that's." "Do it." Her tone cut through his doubt, not unkind but unshakable. He nodded, swallowing hard, and moved. They broke from cover in bursts, sprinting low, dirt spraying under boots. Bullets chased them, snapping, biting, but they kept moving. Elena's lungs burned. Her muscles screamed. But her mind was ice, focused on distance, angles, shadows. They slid behind a boulder halfway up the slope, panting. Walker's hands shook as he reloaded, cartridges clattering against stone. Elena steadied her breath, forcing calm into her bones. "Look at me," she said, low but firm. Walker's eyes lifted. "You keep firing. Short bursts, keep them looking this way. I'll move higher." He frowned, alone. "Yes." "No way," his voice cracked. "They'll cut you down." "They won't." She clipped the mag into her rifle, eyes never leaving his. "Because you won't let them." For a second the world shrank to that silence between them, the young soldier's doubt, her unwavering stare. Then he exhaled, nodding, shoulders squaring. "Copy that, ma'am." She gave the faintest ghost of a smile, then moved. Hands and boots dug into stone, hauling her upward. Each breath scraped her lungs raw. Bullets spat sparks from the rocks, fragments slicing her gloves. She kept climbing, kept moving. The ridge loomed closer. So did the enemy silhouettes. At the top, she dropped flat, chest heaving. The enemy hadn't seen her yet, their attention fixed on Walker's fire below. She steadied her rifle, scope tightening on the nearest gunner. Inhale, hold, squeeze. The shot cracked, the figure dropped. She rolled, shifted aim, fired again. Another fell. The rhythm built, smooth, merciless. Each pull of the trigger peeled space for her team below. Shouts erupted on the ridge. Chaos rippled through their line. And in that fracture her team surged. Gunfire below grew sharper, more coordinated, voices rising with renewed force. Elena pressed the advantage, crawling along the ridge, firing, shifting, firing again. Her arms trembled, her breath ragged, but her focus never wavered. She was no longer ignored. She was the blade cutting their survival from the dark. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then at last silence bled into the ridge. Smoke drifted, the valley stilled. The ambush was broken. Elena lay flat on the ridge, chest hammering, sweat soaking her collar. Her muscles quivered with exhaustion, but her mind burned with clarity. She had taken the ground they said she couldn't. But the victory was not clean. She crawled forward, scanning bodies. Too many, too organized, not a chance encounter. This had been fed to them, prepared for them. Her earpiece crackled. A voice hoarse, ragged, "The commander, status." She swallowed, the bitterness rising in her throat. Ambush neutralized, ridge secured, casualties assessing. The pause on the other end told her he hadn't expected her voice. Perhaps hadn't even realized who had broken the trap. His tone was clipped. Hold position, reinforcements en route. No acknowledgement, no recognition, just another order tossed into the dark. She closed her eyes briefly, chest tightening. Not for his disregard, she was used to that, but for the weight of what she knew now. This mission wasn't what they'd been told. Someone had sold them out. Boots scrambled below as medics moved, shouts echoing in the valley. Walker's voice rose, calling for help. Alina slid down the ridge, dirt caking her gloves, and landed beside him. His face was streaked with sweat, his eyes wide but alive. "You made it," he breathed. She gave a short nod. "We both did." But not all had. Two men lay motionless under tarps, their helmets beside them. Others groaned, bandaged in the dirt. The air stank of blood and cordite. Alina knelt by one soldier, clutching his side, his breaths wet and shallow. He gripped her sleeve with trembling fingers. "Tell me," he rasped, "tell me it mattered." Her throat closed. She wanted to promise, to lie, to stitch meaning into his fatting breath, but she couldn't, not yet. Instead, she squeezed his hand. "You're not forgotten." His eyes fluttered once, then closed. She sat still, the weight of silence pressing. Around her, men moved, voices rose, but none of it pierced the quiet in her chest. Her brother's face flashed in memory. Another loss, another silence. But beneath the ache, something else hardened, a truth sharp as steel. They had been betrayed. And whoever had set them up had underestimated one thing. Alina Ramirez was still standing. Why did the silence after gunfire always feel heavier than the fight itself? Alina knelt in the dust, the ridge looming above like a grave marker. The air still smelled of cordite, acrid and sharp, and yet the valley was too quiet. No shouts, no engines, just the low moans of the wounded and the faint hiss of cooling metal from vehicles below. She had lived through firefights before. She knew the rhythm, chaos, resistance, survival, but this quiet, it felt wrong, not like victory, like something unfinished. Walker crouched beside her, eyes darting to the bodies draped in tarps. He swallowed hard. "We shouldn't be alive," he whispered. She didn't answer, not because he was wrong, but because she felt the truth in his words settle in her bones. The commander strode up, his face streaked with dust, jaw set hard. He didn't meet her eyes. His gaze swept the ridge, the valley, the damage. Then curtly, "We hold here until reinforcement, that's it." Alina's throat tightened. That was it. Men dead, ambush sprung, betrayal in the air, and all he offered was a flat order. She forced her tone steady. "Sir, this wasn't random. They knew we'd be here. They set it up." His head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. For a second she thought he might actually listen, but then his lips pressed thin. "Speculation won't bring our men back. Stay in your lane, Captain." The words hit harder than the gunfire had. "Stay in your lane." Her jaw clenched. She stared back at him, holding his gaze for one breath, then two. She wanted to shout, to throw his arrogance back in his face, but the silence of command was louder than any scream. So she swallowed it again. He turned away, barking orders at others, as if she hadn't spoken. Walker shifted beside her, his voice low. "He knows you're right, he just won't say it." She glanced at the young sergeant, his face pale but steady. His eyes held something she hadn't expected: trust, not the easy kind that came with rank or title, the earned kind, forged in fire. She didn't answer him either, but in her silence there was acknowledgement. Hours bled together as they secured the valley. Medics worked under red light, bandaging wounds, whispering to the dying. The helicopters finally thundered in, rotors kicking up storms of dust, stretchers lifted, bodies bagged. When it was over, the valley looked emptier than before, as if the desert itself had swallowed what had happened, leaving only silence in its wake. Back at base, the debrief felt like a farce. The room was bright, sterile. Maps pinned, charts updated. Men spoke in clipped tones, voices detached, recounting casualty numbers and ammunition spent like items on a ledger. Elena sat rigid, her uniform still streaked with dirt and blood. Her rifle leaned against the wall beside her, dust clinging to the stock. The commander spoke first, his tone firm. Ambush was repelled, mission compromised, but we contained damage. Contained, as if the dead were just numbers on a page. Elena's chest burned. She waited for the words that mattered, the acknowledgement that someone had known, that intel had been poisoned, but they never came. Instead, another officer added, no evidence of insider involvement, likely poor satellite coverage, enemy opportunism. She almost laughed. Opportunism. The ambush had been too clean, too precise. But when she opened her mouth, she saw their eyes, already dismissing her before she spoke. She closed it again. Her silence wasn't agreement, it was survival. But the truth gnawed at her. Later in the barracks, she sat on the edge of her bunk, cleaning her rifle in slow, methodical strokes. Walker appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "You're not going to sleep?" he asked. She didn't look up. "You." He shook his head, stepping inside. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a weariness in his eyes that didn't belong to someone his age. "I keep replaying it," he said quietly. "The way they were waiting, the way we walked right into it." Her hands paused. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. He exhaled. They knew, someone told them. There it was, spoken aloud. Elena felt a strange relief at his words, as if the burden wasn't hers alone anymore. She nodded once. Yes. Walker frowned. Why won't command admit it? Her jaw tightened. Because admitting means weakness, and weakness is what they fear more than loss. He studied her, then lowered his voice. Then what do we do? Her hands resumed their work, cloth sliding along steel. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. We find out who fed them. Walker blinked. You mean on our own? Elena's eyes lifted, sharp, unwavering. If we wait for command, it'll be buried, forgotten, and next time more men die, so yes, on our own. He hesitated, then nodded, resolve flickering in his eyes. For the first time since the ambush, she felt something stir inside her. Not relief, not triumph, something smaller, quieter, hope. But it was fragile. That night sleep came in fragments. When it did, it wasn't peaceful. She dreamed of her brother, his voice, his laugh. The last time she saw him, smiling, cocky, telling her he'd be back before she knew it. And then the call, the silence, the folded flag. She woke with a start, chest heaving, sweat cold on her skin. Her hand found the photo tucked in her pocket, edges frayed, his face blurred from years of touch. She held it until her breathing steadied. The morning came harsh, orders posted, patrols reassigned. Men moved with the same routine efficiency as if nothing had happened. But beneath the surface, whispers spread. Not all believed the official story. Eyes darted in hallways, conversations cut short when officers passed. Something rotten lingered, just out of reach. Elena walked into the operations tent, scanning reports, maps, data streams. Her gaze landed on one document, redacted, names blacked out, details blurred. She recognized the seal, intelligence report. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. The timestamp was 2 days before the ambush. The location matched the valley. Someone had known. Her pulse quickened. She reached for the file, only for a hand to slam it shut. She looked up, the commander. His expression was stone, his voice low, cold. That's classified, Captain. Her breath caught. Sir. You're out of line. The word sliced, Again the wall, again the dismissal. But this time she didn't lower her eyes. She met his stare, unflinching. Her silence spoke louder than any protest. The commander held her gaze a moment longer, then pulled the file away. When he left, the tent felt colder. She exhaled slowly, fists clenched at her sides. The truth was closer now, tangible, but it was guarded, hidden. And the more they buried it, the more dangerous it became. That night she sat again with Walker, both of them hunched over a crate in the dim light of the barracks. He whispered, "I heard something." One of the comm guys said the comms were jammed before the ambush even started, like someone inside flipped the switch. Elena's heart thudded. Betrayal confirmed. But by who? The silence between them stretched, heavy with the weight of what they now carried. Finally, Walker asked, almost afraid, "What do we do now?" Elena's eyes darkened, voice quiet but steady. "We follow the silence, wherever it leads." Her brother's voice whispered again in memory, threading through her resolve. "Don't let them tell you where you don't belong." She belonged here. Not in their approval, not in their silence, but in the truth. How do you search for truth in a place built to bury it? Elena asked herself that question every hour of the next day. On the surface, base life carried on as if the valley had never bled. Trucks rolled in and out, soldiers cleaned rifles, medics logged injuries. But under the routine, something had changed. Whispers lingered in corners, eyes glanced too quickly away, silence stretched too long in mess halls. Everyone knew something wasn't right. No one dared say it out loud. Except her and Walker. They started small, not with confrontation too risky, with observation, patterns, paper trails. Elena sat in the communications tent late at night, the hum of servers filling the silence. Her fingers skimmed over logs, timestamps of radio traffic. There, a gap. 12 minutes before the ambush, comms had gone dark, labeled as technical fault. Technical faults didn't time themselves with precision ambushes. She leaned closer, eyes narrowing, memorizing the code of the technician assigned that shift. She copied it onto a scrap of paper, folding it into her pocket. Walker watched from the doorway, pretending to fuss with gear. His posture was loose, casual, but his eyes tracked every movement, sharp and alert. When she left, he fell into step beside her. "You find anything?" "Enough," she murmured. The night air was cold, carrying the faint smell of oil and dust. Their boots crunched softly on gravel, the base around them dim except for scattered floodlights. "Who?" he pressed. She shook her head. "Not yet, but someone cut our comms intentionally." Walker exhaled through his teeth, shaking his head. "And they'll say it was just a glitch." "They already have." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of their boots filled the silence. Finally, Walker asked, "Why cover it up? Why sacrifice their own men?" Elena's jaw tightened. She had been asking herself the same, but the answer that lingered in her gut was one she wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. Instead, she said softly, "Because sometimes silence serves someone louder than truth ever could." The words hung between them, heavy. The next morning brought no relief. Orders rolled down, patrols reassigned. Elena found herself posted to the armory, a task that felt more like exile than assignment. As she logged weapons, checked serial numbers, she heard footsteps approach. A corporal, barely 20, his face pale, hands trembling as he handed over his rifle. She raised an eyebrow. "Rough night." He gave a strained laugh, but it cracked. His voice was low when he spoke. "I can't stop seeing it, him, right in front of me." 1 second he was, his throat closed. He forced the rifle into her hands, blinking hard. Elena looked at him, really looked. His uniform was neat, but his eyes were wreckage. He wasn't just handing her a weapon. He was handing her a piece of himself he didn't know how to carry anymore. She logged the rifle, then placed her hand briefly on his arm. "You're not the only one." The words were simple, but his shoulders eased just slightly. When he walked away, she felt the weight of his silence add itself to her own. That night she and Walker sat again in the dim of the barracks, voices hushed. Walker leaned forward, elbows on knees. We need more than scraps, if we're right, if someone inside is feeding them. They are, she cut in firm. He blinked, then nodded. Then we need proof, solid, enough that they can't ignore it. Her hand drifted to the photo in her pocket, the one she carried always. Her brother's face stared back, blurred and worn. Proof. She had lived with absence as proof her whole life, but absence wasn't enough to win battles. She looked at Walker, steady. Then we follow the comms, the logs. Whoever was on duty that night, we find them. Walker's brow furrowed. And if it's higher than that, if it's someone untouchable. Her jaw clenched, then we touch them anyway. The words were sharper than she intended, but they tasted like truth. Days blurred. They worked in shadows. Walker lingered near comms techs, listening, picking at threads of conversation. Alina traced requisition forms, nodding unusual requests, extra fuel, unlogged convoys. Every detail was a drop in a bucket. Slowly, the bucket filled. Then came the first crack. Walker slid into the mess hall one evening, eyes darting. He dropped into the seat across from her, lowering his voice. Found something. A convoy went out 2 nights before the ambush, not logged in the official manifest, headed straight toward that valley. Her fork stilled. Who authorized it? He hesitated, then slid a folded note across the table. She unfolded it under the shadow of her hand. A name. Not a technician, not a low-level officer. A major. Her chest tightened. A senior officer, 1 step below her own commander. The air in the mess hall suddenly felt colder. She refolded the note, slipping it into her pocket. Her pulse quickened, but her voice stayed calm. We keep this quiet for now. Walker nodded, eyes flicking nervously around the room. But Alina didn't look away. Her mind was already racing. If a major had signed off an unlogged convoy toward the valley, the ambush wasn't just an accident. It was orchestrated, facilitated. And the silence afterward wasn't incompetence, it was protection. That night Alina lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Instead, memories did. Her brother's laugh, his letters, his name carved into stone. She remembered the hollow explanations, the clipped military language that wrapped his death in words like operational compromise and fog of war. Now she wondered, had he been betrayed too? The thought dug deep, raw and merciless. Her breath shook, but her resolve sharpened. This wasn't about her anymore. Not just about their ambush, their losses. It was about every silence, every buried truth, every soldier left as nothing more than a folded flag. She would not let silence be the last word. The next day she made her choice. She walked into the operations tent with steady steps. The commander was there, hunched over a map with other officers. His eyes lifted when she entered, narrowing. "Captain," he said flatly, "you're not assigned here." Her voice was calm, controlled. "I have information about the ambush." The room stilled. She pulled the folded note from her pocket and placed it on the table. An unlogged convoy, headed toward the valley, authorized by Major Keene. The commander's jaw tightened. His hand slid over the note, folding it closed again without even glancing. His voice was low. "That's enough, Captain." Her pulse thudded. "Sir." "I said that's enough." His eyes locked on hers, cold, unyielding. "You will not pursue this further. That's an order." The words fell like a hammer. Around them the other officers stayed silent, eyes down, complicit in quiet. Alina stood still, every muscle tense. The weight of choice pressed heavy in her chest. Obey, stay silent, let it die. Or, her brother's voice whispered again, steady, unshakable. "Don't let them tell you where you don't belong." She lifted her chin, eyes never leaving the commander. Her silence wasn't obedience this time, it was defiance. When she turned and walked out, the air in the tent felt like it cracked. Walker was waiting outside tense. Well, she exhaled steady, they buried it. His jaw worked, so what now? She looked at him, her voice quiet but resolute. Now we dig deeper, no matter what it costs. The words tasted final, like a vow. How long could she keep walking a tightrope before someone cut the rope itself? That thought haunted Alina as she moved through the days that followed. The base looked the same, uniform routines, clipped orders, faces half hidden behind discipline. But beneath the surface she felt it shift, a gaze that lingered too long, conversations that stopped when she entered, a silence that wasn't passive anymore but sharpened, watching, waiting. She wasn't paranoid, she was being watched. Walker noticed it too. "They've got us marked," he muttered one afternoon, leaning against the sandbags outside the barracks. His eyes scanned casually over the yard, but his tone was anything but casual. "We're ghosts to them now, out there but already buried." Alina followed his gaze. A pair of MPs stood near the motor pool, arms folded, talking quietly. Their eyes flicked toward her, then away. "They think fear works on me," she said softly. Walker's jaw tightened. "It works on everyone sooner or later." She didn't answer. Fear did work. It gnawed at her in the dead of night when the barracks grew too quiet, when even her own breath sounded too loud. Fear whispered that she'd lose her career, her freedom, maybe more. But grief was louder. Every time her resolve faltered, she saw her brother's face, heard the silence that followed his name in the report, felt the absence that ate at her mother's eyes whenever she visited the grave. Fear was heavy, but grief was heavier, and it dragged her forward. That night while the base slept, she slipped into the comms tent again. The glow of monitors lit her face, casting deep shadows. Her hands moved quickly, pulling logs, cross-checking timestamps. And then she found it. A fragment buried in the system. A transmission rerouted through a private channel. It wasn't much, just coordinates, sent out 2 hours before the ambush. But the coordinates matched the valley. Her pulse quickened, proof. But proof was dangerous. She heard footsteps outside, faint but closing. She shoved the drive into her pocket, heart hammering, and slipped out the side flap into the night. The air was cool, her breath ragged. She didn't stop until she was back in the shadows of the barracks. Walker was waiting, arms crossed. "You've got something," he said, reading her face. She nodded, breathless. "Coordinates, sent out before we ever moved." His eyes widened, then hardened. "Then it's worse than we thought." "Yeah," she whispered. "It's not just negligence, it's betrayal." The word hung heavy, dangerous, almost forbidden. But it was the only one that fit. The following days pressed down like a vice. She was reassigned again, this time to training oversight, a post that kept her occupied but isolated. She read it for what it was: containment. Keep her away from comms, from intel, from the heartbeat of the mission. One morning, while running drills, a young recruit stumbled during live fire. The round hit dirt just inches from another soldier's boot. Shouts erupted, tension spiked. Alina was there in an instant, yanking the rifle from shaking hands. The recruit, barely 19, stared at her with wide, wet eyes. I can't do this." Alina's voice was firm, steady, but quiet enough only he could hear. "Then why did you come here?" His throat worked. Because I needed to prove I wasn't nothing, that I could be more." His voice broke on the last word. Her chest tightened. She saw herself in him, the hunger, the need to prove, to rise where others doubted, to carve meaning out of silence. She handed the rifle back, steadying his trembling hands. "You don't prove it by being perfect. You prove it by standing when you want to fall, again and again." The boy blinked at her, then nodded, swallowing hard. Later, alone, Alina felt the words echo back at her like an accusation. Standing when you want to fall. She was telling him to do what she was barely managing herself. But maybe that was the point. Maybe strength wasn't certainty. Maybe it was standing anyway, even when doubt wrapped itself around your throat. Walker found her that evening, slipping into the shadows where she sat cleaning her rifle. His expression was tight. "They know," he said simply. Her hand stilled. "Know what?" "That you've been digging, that you've got something." Her chest clenched. "How?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is they'll come for it, for you." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the metallic click of the bolt she'd half-assembled. Finally she asked, "What would you do?" Walker hesitated, then sighed. "Me, I'd burn it, walk away, live to fight another day." She looked at him, eyes sharp. "And what about the ones who don't get another day, the ones already gone?" His jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. Elena slid the drive from her pocket, the tiny object suddenly feeling like the heaviest weight in the world. Proof, truth, danger, all in her palm. Her voice was low, resolute. "I'm not burning it." Walker shook his head, frustration sharp in his voice. "Then you'd better be ready for what comes next." She was, or at least she told herself she was. That night she made her choice. She slipped past the motor pool, through the gate shadows, heart pounding, out past the perimeter under a sky washed with pale stars. Every step was a gamble. At the edge of the valley she crouched, listening. Silence, only the wind through dry brush. She pulled out the drive, holding it tight. Her brother's face burned in her memory, his absence pressed against her ribs. For him, for them, for every silence forced on every soldier who never got to speak. She whispered into the dark, almost a prayer, "This won't stay buried." When she turned back toward base, she felt the shift, a line crossed, a vow sealed. There was no going back now. What happens when the truth you carry begins to carry you? Elena asked herself that question as she felt the weight of the drive in her pocket grow heavier by the day. At first it had been just proof, evidence she could control, but now it was something else. It dictated her movements, her choices, her sleep. It felt less like she possessed it and more like it possessed her. And others seemed to sense it. She noticed it in the way conversations faltered when she entered, the way officers' eyes lingered too long, measuring, suspicious, the way Walker's tone grew sharper, the lines on his face deeper. The silence wasn't passive anymore, it was pressing in. One evening, after another restless patrol assignment, Walker stopped her just outside the barracks. His expression was hard, his voice low. "They're closing in," he said flatly. Elena scanned the dim compound. MPs patrolled at the edge of the floodlights, boots crunching gravel. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen this before. When command doesn't trust you, they do confront you. They squeeze, cut off your circles, watch you choke yourself." Her jaw tightened, "Then we move faster." Walker grabbed her arm, eyes burning. "Faster toward what, Elena? Toward a court-martial, a dishonorable discharge. You think they'll let you waltz in and accuse a major without crushing you first?" She yanked her arm free, her voice sharp. "I don't care what they do to me. This isn't about me." His eyes flared, then softened, a storm breaking just a little. "Don't you get it? That's exactly what it is. You're the one carrying it, and if you fall, the truth falls with you." For the first time, she saw something in Walker she hadn't before, not just anger but fear. Real, raw fear. "Why are you still here then?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, then looked away. His voice was almost a whisper. "Because I can't watch another name get buried. Not after Ramirez, not after him." The name hung in the air like smoke. Ramirez. She remembered the patrolman, easy smile, steady hand. Lost 2 months back in what had been written off as a misstep. Walker had never spoken of it until now. She said nothing, just nodded once. Sometimes silence was heavier than words. That night as she lay on her bunk, she thought of Walker's face, worn by loss. She thought of the young recruit with shaking hands. The corporal who couldn't stop seeing his friend die. Faces stacked in her memory like stones in a wall. Every stone carried weight, and she was being crushed under them. The next day, orders came down. She was reassigned again, this time to convoy escort duty. A simple run, or so they claimed, but the assignment smelled wrong. Too sudden, too neat. Walker caught her before she mounted the vehicle. "This isn't random," he warned. "They're testing you, or worse." She met his eyes steady. "Then I'll give them their test." The convoy rolled out at dawn, engines rumbling through the valley roads. Dust kicked up, stinging her eyes. She scanned the ridgelines, every shadow a threat. Hours passed without incident. Then, a sound sharp, metallic. The lead vehicle jerked, a tire shredded by something planted beneath gravel. Shouts erupted, brakes screeched, rifles snapped to shoulders. Ambush. Gunfire cracked from the ridges. The convoy scattered, soldiers diving for cover. Elena hit the dirt, weapon up, scanning. The rhythm of fire was disciplined, calculated, too clean. She returned fire, heart hammering. The smell of cordite burned her nose, dust and sweat mixing on her skin. Around her, men shouted, the chaos of survival. But through it all, a thought cut clear. This was no accident. When the firing finally died down, when the dust settled, the toll revealed itself. 2 soldiers dead, several wounded. And no enemy bodies left behind. They'd melted back into the hills. Too clean again. Back at base, the commander's report was swift. Enemy ambush, casualties sustained, convoy compromised. Elena stood there, dust-streaked, jaw clenched. They knew our route. Someone fed them again. The commander's eyes cut to her, sharp as glass. "Captain, you're out of line." Her pulse thundered. She wanted to scream, to throw the drive on the table, to force them to look. But she didn't, not yet. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked out, every muscle coiled tight. Walker caught up to her outside. "You can't hold this much longer," he warned. She stopped, staring at the horizon. The mountains glowed red with sunset, sharp against the fatting sky. Her voice was low, almost breaking. "Do you ever wonder if we're fighting the wrong war, not against them, but against ourselves?" Walker said nothing. The silence was answer enough. That night, sleep didn't come. She sat outside the barracks, the desert wind biting, the stars sharp above. Her hand drifted to the drive again, pressing it into her palm until it hurt. Doubt gnawed at her. Maybe Walker was right. Maybe this would break her. Maybe truth didn't matter in a world built on silence. Her eyes burned. For the first time, she felt tears slip free, hot and unwanted. She pressed her face into her hands, whispering into the dark. "Why him? Why me? Why silence?" A voice broke her spiral, soft, hesitant. "Ma'am." She looked up. The recruit, the same boy she'd steadied weeks ago, stood there, shifting awkwardly, hands stuffed in his pockets. "I saw you out here," he mumbled. "Didn't want you to sit alone." Something in her chest cracked. She managed a faint, weary smile. "Thank you." He nodded quickly, then blurted, "Back in the valley today when I froze. You didn't let me fall apart. I just wanted to say it mattered." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her in the silence again. But the silence felt different now, not crushing, not empty. A reminder, a thread of connection, proof that even small moments of defiance mattered. She closed her eyes, breath steadying. She wasn't done, not yet. When dawn came, she rose with it, resolve hardening like steel. The truth wasn't just a weight, it was a weapon, and she would wield it no matter the cost. What do you do when silence itself becomes the enemy? Elena asked herself that as she stared across the desert at dawn, the horizon painted in muted pink and gold. She'd spent weeks living under the weight of proof, the drive in her pocket like a live round ready to go off. But proof meant nothing if it never left her hands. It was time. She found Walker in the motor pool, tightening bolts on a Humvee that didn't need tightening. His movements were mechanical, distracted, like his thoughts were somewhere else entirely. "We can't keep waiting," Alina said quietly. He didn't look up. Waiting's the only reason we're still breathing. She stepped closer, her voice sharper. "Breathing, not the same as living, you know that." Finally he glanced at her, eyes tired, shadowed. "And what's your plan, Alina? March into headquarters with your little drive and accuse a major. You think they'll clap for you? They'll bury you so deep no one'll remember your name." Her jaw tightened. "Then they'll remember the truth." Walker set the wrench down hard, the clang echoing. His voice cracked, a rare break in his steady armor. "And what about us? What about the ones still here, still trying to make it through? You think truth keeps you alive in a firefight? You think it puts food in the mess? Truth doesn't mean a damn thing if you don't live long enough to tell it." For a moment she just looked at him, breathing steady. Then she asked, almost a whisper, "So why are you still with me?" His silence said more than words. Finally his shoulders sagged. "Because I can't walk away, not from this, not from you." Her chest tightened, but she didn't let it show. That night she made her move. The comms tent was quiet, only the hum of servers breaking the silence. Alina slipped inside, moving like a shadow. Fingers swift, she pulled the drive, slid it into the port, uploaded fragments onto a hidden channel. Not through official systems, too easy to erase. This was different, off-grid, risky. As the files transferred, her pulse thudded loud in her ears. Any second someone could walk in. Any second it could all end. Then footsteps. Her breath caught. She yanked the drive free, killing the screen. Walker stepped in, eyes narrowing. "You're out of your mind." She exhaled, relief and frustration mixing. "I had to. I couldn't sit still anymore." He shook his head, voice low and furious. "Do you have any idea what happens if they trace that? If they know it was you?" "Yes," she said simply, "and I don't care." Walker stared at her, then laughed once, sharp, bitter. "God, you sound just like Ramirez. He thought the same thing, that the truth was worth the hit. You know where it got him." The name landed heavy. Alina swallowed, steadying her voice. "It got him remembered." Walker looked away, jaw tight. "Remembered doesn't keep you breathing." She stepped closer, voice soft. "No, but it gives the ones left behind something to hold on to." For a long moment they just stood there. Two soldiers, caught between fear and defiance, between survival and truth. The next day the pressure sharpened. Orders came down. Alina was reassigned again. This time to administrative duty in headquarters, a cage disguised as promotion. As she filed reports, she caught fragments of conversations, whispers about her, eyes watching her too closely. She was being boxed in, step by step. One afternoon, a colonel she barely knew stopped her in the hallway. His tone was polite, but his eyes were knives. "Captain Torres, a word of advice. Soldiers who dig too deep often find themselves buried in their own holes." Her pulse quickened, but she forced a calm nod. "Understood, sir." When he walked away, her hands shook, not from fear, from rage. That night she and Walker sat outside the barracks, the desert wind cutting cold. Walker broke the silence first. "They're tightening the noose. You feel it, right?" She nodded. "Then we don't wait for them to finish the knot." His brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we take it out, off base, get it into hands they can't control." Walker's eyes widened. "That's suicide. You get caught smuggling intel." She cut him off. "We don't get caught." The silence stretched. Then he sighed, running a hand down his face. "God help me, you're really gonna do this?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "Yes, because if I don't, no one will." Walker leaned back, staring at the stars. "You're gonna drag me straight into hell, aren't you?" Alina managed a faint smile. "Only if you follow." For the first time in weeks, he almost smiled back. The plan was reckless, dangerous, but necessary. They would move the drive off base during the next supply run, hide it in plain sight, pass it into hands beyond the chain of command, a risk so sharp it bordered on madness. But as Alina lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she knew there was no other choice. Her brother's face burned in her memory, the boy recruit's trembling hands, Walker's grief over Ramirez. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It never had been. When dawn came, she rose with it, heart steady, resolve set. The time for silence was over. The desert had a way of swallowing secrets. But this one couldn't stay buried. Alina stood by the supply convoy at first light, the weight of the drive pressed against her ribs under the fabric of her uniform. Her heart didn't race, it was too steady, too focused. The decision had already been made. Now it was only execution. Walker tightened the straps on a crate, keeping his hands busy, his voice low. Last chance to call this off. She didn't look at him. We're past last chances. The convoy commander, a young lieutenant barely shaving, barked the usual orders. Engines rumbled, dust kicked up. Soldiers moved with the rhythm of routine. No one noticed the two of them slip a small black case into the bottom of a supply pallet bound for the forward operating base. No one questioned why Alina's clipboard had an extra sheet, coded instructions for a contact who wasn't supposed to exist. It was almost too easy, too smooth. And that's what unsettled her most. They rolled out with the convoy desert wind whipping against their faces in the open truck. The sun blazed high, casting long shadows. Alina scanned the horizon, every instinct screaming alert. Halfway through the run, the ambush hit. A deafening crack split the air. The first Humvee in the line exploded into a fireball, flipping onto its side. Gunfire ripped across the convoy. Dust and chaos erupted. Soldiers dove for cover, shouting, returning fire. Alina's blood went cold. This wasn't random. This was precision. Someone had known. Walker shoved her down behind the wheel well, bullets sparking off metal inches away. They knew, he yelled over the gunfire. God damn it, Alina, they knew. She gritted her teeth, heart hammering. Then we fight through. For 20 brutal minutes the desert became hell. Muzzle flashes lit the ridges. Rockets streaked overhead. The convoy answered with heavy fire, soldiers scrambling to hold formation. Alina fired until her rifle clicked dry, then reloaded without thought. But amid the smoke she saw them, not insurgents, not locals, clean uniforms, U.S. issue, faces she recognized. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't an ambush, it was a purge. They weren't trying to stop a convoy, they were trying to stop her. Walker caught her stare, followed her gaze, his face hardened. Son of a bitch. A grenade detonated nearby, the shockwave slamming them against the truck. Alina's ears rang, vision swimming. She tasted blood. Through the haze, she saw one of them moving for the supply pallets, the black case. No, she staggered forward, firing, the round catching the man square in the chest. He dropped, but more were coming. Walker grabbed her arm, dragging her toward cover. We can't hold this. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. We can't lose it. Another explosion ripped the air, flipping a truck. Screams cut through the smoke. The convoy was breaking. Alina's mind raced. If the drive was lost, everything was lost. She pulled a flare from her belt, struck it, and hurled it into the pallet. Flames roared to life, consuming wood, canvas, supplies, and everything hidden among them. Walker gaped at her. What the hell are you doing? Her voice was steel. If they can't have it, they can't bury it. The backup's already out there. That was decoy storage. For a beat he just stared. Then realization hit, the upload, the shadow channel. She hadn't trusted just one plan. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. You really don't quit, do you? She reloaded, eyes blazing. Not when the truth's on the line. The fight dragged on, brutal and merciless. By the time reinforcements arrived, the desert was littered with burning wreckage and bodies, friend and foe indistinguishable in the smoke. Alina staggered back to base, uniform torn, face streaked with grit and blood. Her body ached, but she barely felt it. Word spread fast. The convoy had been hit, supplies lost, casualties high. But no one said out loud what Alina already knew: this wasn't enemy fire. This was cleanup. That night she sat alone in the barracks, staring at her hands, calloused, bloody, shaking. Walker stepped in, limping, bandaged. He dropped onto the bunk across from her. For a long while neither spoke. Finally he broke the silence. "So, you got it out." Her eyes lifted, hollow but determined. "Pieces of it, enough." "You think anyone'll listen?" A faint, tired laugh escaped her. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it's out there now. And once truth's out, you can't kill it, not really." Walker leaned back, exhaling slow. "You know they'll come for you." She met his gaze. "They already did, and I'm still here." For the first time in months, his eyes softened. Respect, maybe even pride. Days later, a ripple spread across the networks. Not official reports, never those, but whispers, leaks, snippets of recordings, fragments of files, grainy images, soldiers who shouldn't have been lost, missions twisted into lies. It was raw, incomplete, but undeniable. The brass scrambled, deniability cracked. Investigations were announced, then stonewalled, then demanded again. The world's gaze began to shift, if only slightly. In the shadows of it all, Alina kept moving, transferred, reassigned, always under watch, always under suspicion, but alive. Because sometimes survival wasn't about living untouched. It was about living long enough to leave a mark that couldn't be erased. One evening she stood at the edge of the base, desert wind lifting her hair. The horizon stretched endless, unforgiving. She thought of her brother, of Ramirez, of the nameless recruits and forgotten casualties. She whispered to them, to herself, to the silence that had tried so hard to choke her. "You're not gone, not anymore, they'll remember." The wind carried her words into the dark. And for the first time in a long time, Alina Torres allowed herself to believe, not in victory, not in safety, but in something fiercer. Hope.